Hey guys, this is going to be my thoughts on the season 4 finale of The Handmaid's Tale. The episode is called Wilderness, so I will be going into full spoilers, but just a general summary of the season and how I thought it ended. And so, pretty much the main focus of this episode is resolving the whole um, Fred situation, really, the cliffhanger and the twist from last week. Then the Canadian authorities are actually going to release him in exchange for him giving vital intel on the goings on Gilead, in Gilead, and that obviously led to rage from June. We saw the ending when she literally pursued the Canadian official outside and screamed in his face, says, "I'm gonna kill you," which again I think I commented in the last review was a little over the top. I could see what they were going for, but it was a little something they could have toned down maybe. But yeah, this season finale sort of deals with that whole plot and where it's going and resolves it in a satisfying way, although with a big set piece, which again maybe could have been toned down a bit. Maybe they went a bit far with the final set piece. As much as what it actually is doing makes a lot of sense, but it's all about June's cunning plan, really, to finally get revenge on Fred and to ultimately make sure that this is not a man who's going to walk free after the crimes of the past. And there's some murky stuff tied up into this, into the places she goes to, but ultimately you're obviously on her side because of what he has done to her and the other handmaids. And the big moment I'm talking about is that it leads them alone with him in the woods, not just June, but the other former handmaids. And in this very disturbing, animalistic sort of visual, they all go after him. They all chase him in the woods. This show never afraid of like a big metaphor visual, and they all literally, well, bite into him and kill him and brutally kill him. So that's the whole thing. But I'll talk about how we get there. And how we get there is actually really good stuff, because I think we see some really good character stuff from June in this episode, where it shows you how smart she is, how kind of cerebral she is, and how she sets this whole plan in motion to stop Fred and to get her revenge, and just how she can almost play the game but use it to her effect. So it's almost like she's come from being used in Gilead to like using others, maybe in quite a sinister sort of a way. And so we have this stuff with Fred where his wife Serena is like even standing up for him, because he faces like these hostile questions from like a Canadian lawyer, and Serena's kind of getting on his side and saying, well, why is he being treated hostile? We're giving valuable intel, and you know, really he deserves better. He deserves like a better laptop, better internet connection, because he's got people to contact, stuff like that. And also the overall message that Serena is willing to leave Canada alongside Fred as his wife, and that's questioned by the Canadian official, and she's like, well, why would it be any other way, almost. And she's sort of like trying to press him to like expedite the decision, because there's tension on the other side from the June camp, where June wants to challenge this and to try and present evidence where they won't allow Fred out. But in any case, it's sort of an interesting position for Serena in the next season, especially since now at the end of this episode they do kill Fred off. But what happens is June does sort of play the politics game very well, because she sort of pursues like the Canadian official and tries to talk him through and say, come on, after all this guy has done, And when he's quite hostile and says, well, this isn't right, just showing up at my house like this and pressuring me, and she takes a step back and says, I'm sorry, and but can we just have a moment? Can we talk about this? So we do actually see how June does have layers like that, and can take a step back and put a softer sort of voice on it. But what happens is she convinces him to take a drive with her, and they go to meet Lawrence at this like sort of cafe, and June obviously has set all this up for Lawrence to be there. And it's another nice little quirky sort of scene in a way with Lawrence, because there's sort of a gag where he's tried to say, well, we can offer certain conditions and stuff. We can talk about changing certain laws, and June's like smiles, and Lawrence, don't be a dick. He's like, well, it was worth a try, but what happens is that then Lawrence comes up with an alternative plan where he says, we'll give you these people who have been captured, all these names, and there's a big file there, and it's part of June's persuasion where she says, look at these women, look at their history, surely Fred isn't more important than them. And it's this whole political thing where they offer a trade, these women, for Fred, because part of the thing they're talking about in the episode is that actually if Fred goes back to Gilead and is tried there, ironically it would be a harsher trial on him, because I guess he's now mud in Gilead. They would frown upon him, and it might not be as fair a trial. Whereas they're talking about moving him to Geneva, where he would suddenly have new freedoms, and they're also talking about pretty much because he's given them this intel, he would be allowed to walk free after the trial. There may be some cross-examination, but the idea is that they're making this deal so he would pretty much go free. So I do like that sort of cruel twist of fate. Than if he goes back to Gilead, he would actually have less of a chance of being free. So that's pretty funny. But they offer the Canadian officials this sort of trade, this alternative deal, and he's like, well, I'll take it to my superiors. And obviously with this being the finale, and with it being we're coming to the crunch of the plot, then this is sort of speeded up where Fred is like later arrested, and he's not a freed man, and they take him to like the border, the bridge on the border essentially, and Lawrence is there waiting for him, and again Lawrence is just glorious, because he's like sort of beaming and smirking, and he's almost enjoying this position of having power over Fred. Then he's actually the stronger. He's got more power for the first time in ages than Fred. And I guess the episode does ultimately confirm Lawrence as a good guy who's had to compromise certain like things in that. But because at one point Nick comes along, and bearing in mind they're on the border, and it turns out that the whole plan is that just to let June and the other handmaids have free reign. So it's then he's not even going to be taken to Gilead for like a trial. So Lawrence says, would I have any jurisdiction to override you? And Nick says, no, once we're over the border, I'm afraid it's my word. And Lawrence like, oh, okay, what a shame. I'm sorry. And so Fred has to be like, he's got no choice. He's taken over the border to like this neutral place, and rather than just again be tried and have a court case, obviously the whole plan is June and the others are going to get their revenge. And another thing to say is that Joseph Fiennes is fantastic as Fred in the episode. His reactions to it, and this is really satisfying. And this is what kind of serialized TV should be about. Then ultimately this really nasty, terrible man who was had all these seasons where he's like inflicted so much like torture and pain and just been a really sort of slimy creep bag for so long, finally he gets his true sort of comeuppance. And again, it's a little bit murky where you say, well, is this the way justice should be dealt? But I think certainly in the Handmaid's Tale universe, it sort of has this very sort of sinister, cynical sort of worldview where a lot of times this sort of character is just going to weasel his way out of true justice. So sometimes the best justice is literally revenge. It's what we see. But yeah, Joseph Fiennes does a great job of the reactions when he realises that, oh my god, they've got me, I'm in the shit. So first of all, when he gets arrested when he's not expected to, and he's sort of like monologuing about, I'm supposed to be a free man, you don't know what you're doing. And then he sort of says similar things to Nick later, and he just becomes more and more desperate once he finds out he's basically done for. And as I said, you get the big sort of set piece of the handmaids like a pack of wolves really lynching into him, and the whole thing is satisfying. It's a satisfying payoff, and maybe killing Fred off is a logical thing to go. He's had 4 good seasons, and maybe it's just time to bring it to the end. Obviously, I was a little bit unsure about the twist last week when the government said, okay, we're releasing him if he gives us this intel. And again, I just worried that it might revert back to type a bit too much and just go through some of the same motions. But I'm actually happy then with this decision to kill him off and this big payoff where these handmaids get their long-awaited sort of revenge with him. And there's a clever scene with him and June which sort of sets this up earlier in the episode, where she actually comes to him and they sort of set up a meeting, and he actually apologises, not like wholeheartedly. I think it's a very political like apology where he doesn't really own up to some of the horrible things he's done, but he says it in a very political way. And June's just sitting there, and they kind of have this sort of warmth towards each other on the surface. Obviously we know it's an act from both of them, but they're sort of reminiscing about the Gilead days, and they sort of speak about June with her old like handmaid's name, and it's intriguing because when that scene was going on, I thought, well, what's the twist going to be? What is June sort of planning here? And I think it's just this way of luring him into a false sense of security and playing with him the way like he's played with her in the past, where he thinks, oh, okay, she's actually being quite agreeable, and just catching him off guard. And there's this clever sort of metaphor throughout the episode, because the episode starts with like kind of a fantasy scene with June like looking quite sexy and glamorous, and like she's dancing with him, and they return to that visual a couple of times in the episode, and the voiceover is kind of telling you then you have to play the dance almost, you have to do the moves, you have to sort of act like they're your friend, all that kind of thing. So it goes to the whole idea of her sort of tricking Lawrence or Fred, sorry, and luring him into a false sense of security. So that's the season finale. Now, I think my one big nitpick is that we have another romantic scene with June and Nick, and I'm like, oh really? Because they kiss again when Nick hands like Fred over, and I think one way you could read that is it's probably June maybe using Nick's feelings for her, like in a way she is using Nick a bit, although he's happy to do it. He's got no love lost for Fred, but I groaned a little bit when they kissed again. It's like, oh come on, can we move on with this? And it's partly because probably, if anything, I feel they should either just return to the storyline and do something properly with it, or they should just move on and that's it. Because of course they did have sort of an emotional goodbye in the last episode. Now, I think one of the things they might be sort of setting up, because at the end of the episode, June has like this emotional moment with Nicole, and there's this kind of weird vibe between her and Luke, where Luke is almost resigned to losing her, and by losing her, I think maybe then she's going back to Gilead. Then that's going to be probably the mission for the final season, which I think the 5th season will be. So then I think, yeah, that's going to be a thing. But June, I think Luke is a little disturbed at the way she's gone. But there's a scene, the closing scene is just her she says, "Can I just have 5 minutes with Nicole?" And so that's sort of the end. So I'm wondering if they might go down this path of, maybe she's destined to be with Nick in a way. Maybe she's tied to Gilead in a way she's no longer tied to Canada and to a relationship with Luke. Maybe, and again, this is another tragic beat, but maybe she's just so, Gilead has come to define her so much that maybe she can't go back to living a normal life in Canada with Luke. I sort of hope it doesn't pan out that way, just because I am done with the Nick and June stuff. But I guess at least if they commit to it and say, okay, this is just what June is now, and the relationship with Nick makes more sense, then it at least means that those random moments where they kiss was sort of, they weren't for nothing. But we'll see how it goes. But it obviously sets the mission statement. I think they don't confirm it, but I'm guessing the next season and the final season will be the mission to Gilead to finally get Hannah back. So they have it. The season finale, I thought it was a good season finale. I think it's been a much better season this time around. I thought it was a big step up from season 3. I still don't think it's as good as the early seasons, like the first 2, which I think were exceptional. But I think the show has moved on now and done different things with the characters, so I'm happy that it has sort of justified having multiple seasons. I think it has justified sticking around longer than maybe the peak, if you like, in those early seasons, where you could say, okay, there's only one place for down. It has remained in a very solid middle ground, and it's at least done different things with the characters, a lot of which I have enjoyed and have felt, satisfied. So a good season, and I think particularly the second half of the season, when there were certain question marks, and I think by and large the show has answered them quite well. So I'm pleased with it. I'm pleased moving forward, and probably, I think I've heard 5 is the last season, so I'm happy with that. I think that feels like a good time to end it. So that's my thoughts on The Handmaid's Tale Wilderness, the season 4 finale. Please let me know your thoughts in the comments below. You can like and subscribe. Also share me out on social media, as that will get my content to more eyeballs. Ding the bell on YouTube. It will notify you when I have a new video that goes up, or if I go live on the live stream, which I do fairly regularly. But I'll see you guys again soon. Thanks. Goodbye.